Oregon is now the only state in the United States that has non-unanimous jury verdicts for felonies, not for murder, but for any other felony.
At a recent local Public Safety Coordinating Council meeting, we heard from District Attorney Beth Heckert. She summarized several recent key modifications to major laws in Oregon that will have significant effects on the criminal justice system in Jackson County. One of the potential modifications regards the question of the constitutionality of Oregon's non-unanimous felony conviction, which could be changed depending on the verdict of the ongoing Ramos versus Louisiana trial at the Supreme Court. Keep watching to hear the summary and potential impacts of the changes.
So although we're in the midst of the 2020 session, this is the legislation from 19. One thing that didn't get fixed by the legislature that I just want to kind of put on your radar is unanimous juries. So there was a bill before the legislature to refer this out to the voters. It has to be a voter approved because it's a constitutional amendment. Oregon is now the only state in the United States that has non-unanimous jury verdicts for felonies, not for murder, but for any other felony. We do a 10-2. So we had company with Louisiana. Louisiana changed their law. So there's a case pending before the U.S. Supreme Court that we're all kind of sitting nervously waiting to see how it's going to be decided. And that case is Ramos versus Louisiana. So in the Ramos case, he was convicted of murder by a non-unanimous jury. So that couldn't have happened in Oregon because Oregon still had unanimous for murder. So we're waiting to see how the Supreme Court looks at this. The worst case scenario would be they say unanimous jurors are required. It's unconstitutional to not have a unanimous juror. That will put thousands of convictions in Oregon at risk, and looking at like what do we do about that. So if that was to happen, that's like worst case scenario. All the way to they could very narrowly look at that case in Ramos and say you have to have a unanimous verdict on murder, and that's the facts that they presented with in Ramos. So if they said that, that would have no effect on Oregon cases because we already had that. That'll have an effect on Louisiana cases because they had been doing that for a long period of time. We have 15 cases only in Jackson County where someone's preserved that appeal issue. The way that we know whether someone's a unanimous verdict or not is we have to poll the jury. And so we have been polling the jury ever since this came up on our radar. But if we didn't poll the jury, we may not know whether they were a unanimous verdict or not a unanimous verdict. And so this just could really be a huge issue in the criminal justice system. Across the state, we only have 15 cases in Jackson County where they've preserved this and they're sitting there waiting for Ramos to be decided. But across the state, there's over 500 cases. And then if they make a really broad ruling, then it's not these ones that are preserved. It might be post-conviction, which means my attorney didn't do a good job because they didn't raise unanimous. And so we could see a lot of cases be returned back to our county to have to try. The 15 cases that are preserved, we've known they were on appeal. So we've saved our evidence. We could try those cases again if we had to, if we could find witnesses and so forth. If it was a really broad ruling, then we've considered the case closed because the appeals time went by, and so we could have cases where we had to dismiss because we no longer have the evidence. The 15 people who are sitting up in prison could get immediately returned to our jail, and we'd have to make room for them because presumably they're all there on pretty serious charges because they've had still serving their sentences and so forth.